show you guys again how to UV map this. So let's go to Windows, Modeling Editor, UV Editor, and we're going to take a look at my tree. Okay, I'm just going to delete any shells that existed before so I can show you guys again. So object mode, first thing you did was create a camera-based map, okay? So if you have your tree selected and you have no UV shells, delete any UV shells that exist if you need to, and then do create camera-based, okay? So now I have a camera-based map of my tree. It looks something like this, kind of looks like my tree. All right, and before I kind of took you guys through the process of using the 3D cut and sew tool to unwrap this. I'm going to show you guys a quicker way to do it, really quick. So I will do right-click menu, edge selection, okay? And I have both my UV editor open and my perspective view open. And I am just going to go ahead and grab the edge loop at the bottom of each of my branches. And then I'm going to cut that away from the tree. So right here, I'm going to go through. For you guys to do the same thing as well. Grab the edge loop around the bottom of each of your branches. You'll notice that you can't double click to grab this edge loop because Maya can't tell if these edges are part of this loop or if they're part of that loop. So it doesn't let you do the double click to grab it. But go ahead and manually hold down shift, go around and grab all of those edges at the bottom of a branch. Just like that. So I have all the edges at the bottom of my branch. If I hit hotkey 4, I can see in wireframe mode, I went all the way around successfully, okay? And now I'm gonna use just the cut tool. So cut, and I've made a cut. Now I have 2 different UV shells. I have one for this branch, and I have one for the rest of my tree. So I'm gonna do the same thing to all of my branches. I'm gonna go through and grab that bottom edge loop, hotkey Q so that I don't accidentally move things. And I'm in edge selection mode, right? Going around, grabbing all of the edge loops, all of the edges, on the bottom of that, right there. All right. Okay, I made it all the way around. Hotkey 4, just double check. Yep, I made it all the way around. And then I am going to cut again. Okay, so now I have a couple different UV shells. So I'm going to keep going, and make it all the way around all of your edges. So I'm going to do that really quick. Around your branches, I mean. Right here. Oops. Alt. All right. And to there, okay. And then I'm going to cut this one. Cut. I'll do this one as well. So again, I'm basically cutting UV shells off for all of my branches. Okay, cut. And let's see, do I need to do any more? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, now I have 5 different UV shells. You guys might have more or less. And maybe you're not done with that process, but I'm going to show you the next step. So eyes up front, take a look at the next step, even if you aren't done with cutting off all your branches. But now that I've created a bunch of different UV shells for all of my branches, all I have to do is go through and make one cut through each of them. Okay, so I'm going to grab this one, this UV shell. Okay, starts right there. Okay, so I'm going to grab this edge right at the bottom, and then I am going to hold down shift and double click along that same edge loop all the way up to the top, and I will cut. Okay, and then the only other thing I need to do on this branch is go around this top edge loop and cut everything except for one of the edges, right? We already talked about how to do those top parts. So same thing. So now I'm just going through and I'm individually finding the UV shell, okay? And then I'm making one cut from the bottom all the way to the top on one edge, okay? And then I'm cutting around the top, right? So let's go ahead and cut. All right, same thing for this one. Let's see, is that where my UV shell starts? Let's double check. So this one starts all the way down there. So I'm going to make my cut right here. and I hold down shift and I double click, and that lets me select that entire loop, and I'm going around and then cutting. Okay, so do that for every single one of your branches and the main stem, right? So grab here to there, hold down shift, and we're going to go all the way around and cut. Okay, and then the last one I need to do is my base one, okay? So this one, I need a cut going all the way through. I think I want the front of my tree to be right here, so I'm going to put the seam on the back, and I'll do it right here. So that's, okay, up, all the way through that entire one, and then around the top. And then for this one, I also need to go around the bottom because this is the stump of the tree. So I'm going to go around the bottom as well, all the way except for one edge, and then cuts. Okay, now that you have made all of those cuts, once you get to that place, okay, go ahead and eyes up front again. So even if you aren't caught up with me, watch the next step. You're going to select all of those UV shells. So select them all, and then you're going to unfold them all. Okay, and now you have a whole bunch of different pieces that got unfolded. All right, so we can use this as well. And as long as you can identify which piece goes to which part and then sort of like position it in your UV map in a way that makes sense to you. So this is my base of the tree. So I'm going to have this be like kind of the main middle one. Okay, this branch looks like it comes up off on this side. So I'm just going to help myself remember by sort of positioning these branches in places that make sense to me. Okay, this one's the one that comes off a different branch, and it comes off this branch. So this one's going to go kind of over here. All right, and this one comes off of it, sort of going that direction. Okay, so I'm just sort of aligning these in a way that makes sense to me so that when I go ahead and paint my textures later, I know which branch goes where. Does that kind of make sense to you guys? So I'm looking at my front view, and right now I can tell this is the main piece. This one sort of comes off this way. That one goes that way, right? And I can kind of identify what each of the pieces are based off of how I position them. So you can leave it like this and use this as your UV snapshot with the 5 different pieces, or you can try and stitch these back together a little bit. So if you want to try and stitch them back together, you just have to pick a side to put them on. So for this one, I think I want to put it on, let's see, that side. So you can get to this point, and then you can decide if you want to piece these back together. Okay, so if I want to sew this back together over here, I'm going to grab those 2 edges that show up on this side, and I'm going to choose Move and Sew. And then I'll unfold this later so it's not overlapping. But now let's check this one. Okay, so this one's tricky because it's inside of here, so I would have to cut this apart to sew that back together, which I can do, so I'll go ahead and do that. Cut that apart real quick. And now I'll sew this in right there. Oops, Move and Sew. All right, and then let's unfold this so I can see what's going on. So unfold. Okay, and I'm sort of piecing back together parts of my map. So you can do this. You can re-sew those branches back in, right, in areas of your map that make sense. So let's see, let's do this side actually. Yeah, these 2 right here. Move and Sew. And then this one, I'm going to sew back in some of those pieces. Move and Sew. And now I have the whole thing sewn together, and I can unfold it again and just make sure I don't have any overlapping. So you can do it like that, or if you want, you can just leave it laid out without stitching these pieces back together, if that makes more sense to you. And the only downside of that is that you just have a couple more seams. But for our purposes, that won't be too much of a problem. So just make sure you arrange all of your shells within this 0 to 1 box. And then, hey guys, eyes up front, let me show you how to grab your UV snapshot again. So once you have all of your shells unfolded, to grab your UV snapshot, you just go to Image, and then UV snapshot. We're going to change the edge color to this like bright green color. Make sure the image format is like PNG or JPEG. And then make sure you're saving it to your H drive. This one I'm going to call you call it tree UV snap or something like that. Save it and then apply and close. And now you'll have a snapshot that shows your UV material. So it's okay if you guys don't have your entire tree unfolded into one UV shell. If you have multiple different shells, I'm fine with that for this project. But then again, for some of you guys who were able to successfully get this done, your UV shell might look something more like this, right? Where it's all pieced together. And so you can do the same thing, UV snapshot with this. And save that. All right, take the next 20 minutes to finish unwrapping your tree. If you guys need help, raise your hand. I'll come around and help you. If you're done unwrapping your tree, add more leaves. Put your leaves around your tree. All right, so we have to move on. So let's go to the next step. Hopefully you guys all have your UV shell. If you don't, then you can watch those videos and get caught up. But if you do have your UV shell, then please follow along with the next part of the lab. Okay, eyes up front, pause, anything else you're doing. Okay, I'm going to save real quick. All right, we made that UV snapshot, right? So now we're going to take a look at that UV snapshot. Go ahead and find yours. Let's see, did I put mine in? Images, I think I put mine in images. Okay, so, and I have my tree UV snapshot. Yep, this is the right one. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and grab it and open it with Photoshop. So right click on it, open with Photoshop. Okay, and because I exported mine as a PNG, it's nice and see-through, so I'm going to just add a little background black layer. So I add a layer down here with the little plus sign, and then I'm going to use the dump bucket right here. It might be under your gradient tool. You can right-click on this to find the tool underneath to go ahead and dump in my new layer that I added, black, just so I can see what's going on. Okay, and then this layer, you can kind of see it. I'm going to affect, let's see if I can affect the brightness so you guys can see it a little bit better. I'm just going to duplicate it. Okay, a couple times. Can you guys see that at all up there? Or not really-ish? Now you can see it? I'm just going to group these. Don't do what I did which was like duplicate this a million times. I just did that so that you guys could see it on your screen. Okay. And I'm just going to call this UV shell. Okay, so you should have a UV shell and a black layer. I exported it as a PNG, which is why mine is clear. You might want to export yours as a PNG as well instead of a JPEG, just so you have that clear background. And then now go ahead and download. I gave you guys some tree bark materials in the Google Drive. So go ahead and download those. They're in MyLab 7 tree bark materials. Download these images. So you can find that through the Canvas link And then, let's see. And then I am just going to open these up in Photoshop. So I will go File, Open, because I downloaded them. And then grab those from my Downloads folder and open them up in here. Okay, and they all came in. Bunch of different images. You guys can use these. You can also find your own on the internet. That's fine either way. But I am going to bring these over into this file right here. So I will go ahead and unlock them, unlock the layer, and then Control-C to copy and Control-V to paste. And it just comes in on its own layer in Photoshop. So I'm going to do that with all of these images. So I unlock it, Control-C to copy, Control-V to paste. And again, after you download those images, you do File, Open, and you open them up in Photoshop to get these open. I'm just bringing these different tree barks in. So I unlock the layer, click on it, Control-C to copy, Control-V to paste. Alright, and I'm just bringing all of these different tree bark images into my UV snapshot file. So copy and pasting all of these in here. Okay, when you're done, your file should look something kind of like this. Okay, where you have all of these different bits of tree bark in here. They're all on different layers. And then you have, maybe behind them all, your UV shell and layer 2. So I'm going to group all of these layers together into one group so I can toggle the visibility more easily. So I select the top one, select the bottom one, and then do Control-G to group them. And I'm going to call these bark group, something like that. And then I can toggle my visibility like this. Okay. So I should have I have my UV shell, I have my background layer, and I have the tree bark layer. Okay, group. And now I'm going to add a layer on top of my background layer, and I'm going to put it on top of my UV shell layer as well. Okay, and this is going to be the layer I'm actually going to paint on. Okay, so this is where I'm actually going to start adding the texture information for my tree, is this new layer that I've added. So this is when I'm going to get out my paintbrush and start painting. And I want you guys just to watch for now. If you're following along, great. If you got stuck, I'll come help you in a second. But just for now, watch what I do next, just so you get a sense for what comes next. So I'm going to grab the brush. Hotkey B is the brush tool in Photoshop. And then you can change the size of your brush with the bracket tools. They kind of look like this on your keyboard. Those are your bracket tools. Okay, and I'm just going to grab like brown. If you want your tree to be a different color, if you want like a white aspen type tree or just a random color tree, you can do whatever color you want, but I'm just going to grab brown for now. And then I'm just going to paint, and I'm going to try and cover 100% of my UV shell. And I'm overlapping the edges a little bit, but I'm not going to paint anywhere else in that blank space. Okay, so I'm just sort of trying to cover where all of my UV shell is. That way I know, like, general sense where all of my texture information needs to be. And then I also know that all of this blank space doesn't matter. Okay, so whatever you put in the blank space, it's not actually going to show up in Maya because that's not where your UV shell is. Okay, if you guys have multiple different UV shells, then you can just paint them individually. That's totally fine too. When you do your UV snapshot, when you have multiple shells, just make sure you select them all so they all come in together. Okay, so go ahead and paint your base layer. You're going to paint your base layer, and then we're going to use the clone stamp tool to add some of these materials. Okay, so I'm going to turn on my bark layer and click on it. And over here is this clone stamp tool, okay? It's hotkey S in Photoshop to get into the clone stamp tool. So I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to come into the layer that I'm trying to clone, and I will hold down Alt and click. Okay, and that sets that as my target. So that's what I'm cloning. Now I'm going to turn off my bark layer, go back onto my other layer, and I can start painting. Okay, and I can start painting some of that bark texture on. And you can't see it because I turned off my other layer, but it's essentially copying the bark from that other layer onto this one. Okay, so I'm just going to come in and start painting some of that bark texture on. And you want to keep in mind that you want to go in the direction of your branches. Okay, so this maybe is working for parts of it, but maybe it isn't working for this part. Maybe this is wrapping around my tree the wrong direction. So the way I would fix that is I can go back into my bark layer, click on that image, and then do hotkey V, which is the selection mode, and rotate it, okay? And now, when I clone that, okay, I can clone it again with the clone stamp tool, right? Hotkey S. I have to hit check first, hotkey S, and then hold down Alt. Now I'm cloning that angled version of it, and now I can start painting sort of that angled bark texture onto my model, okay, or onto my texture map. So what I want you guys to do is sort of piece together, mishmash together, using the clone stamp tool, this bark texture onto your UV shell, and try and go in the directions that you know your branches go. And you can add from the other barks again as well. But we're just trying to add some of that texture information in. Oh, actually, okay. Rather than doing it exactly like I did it, I want you guys to do the clone stamping stuff on a new layer rather than on top of that brown layer. We want to keep a copy of that brown layer for later. So don't do exactly what I did. Do as I say, not as I do. But yeah, we want one layer that is just entirely brown, and then we need another layer where we're actually starting to put that bark material, right? So Alt, click, and now I'm going to start painting, oops, right here. Alt, click, and now I can start painting my bark material on my new layer, okay? So you're going to do it like that. That way you have two separate layers, and then eventually, after you've brought in as much bark material as you want, we're going to duplicate that bottom layer, put it on top, and then we're going to use the multiply effect to change it so that you have this dark brown bark material, okay? So go ahead and start piecing together your bark material. Raise your hand if you need help with any of these steps, and I'll come around and help you guys.